"I am too big to make love, sir. Let me clean," the maid said to the rich rancher. The dust settled on the horizon as Eleanor Whitmore stepped down from the stagecoach, her worn boots meeting the sun-baked earth of redemption. Texas. She clutched a small carpet bag containing everything she owned, 2 dresses, her mother's Bible, and a letter offering her employment at the Double J Ranch. She'd traveled 300 miles from San Antonio, answering an advertisement for a housekeeper. At 32 years old and without family, Eleanor had learned to be practical about her prospects. The advertisement hadn't mentioned that the ranch owner was Jeremiah Kane, the wealthiest cattleman in 3 counties, a man whose name was spoken with equal parts respect and envy throughout the state. The ranch foreman, a grizzled man named Pete, collected her in a wagon. As they rattled along the dusty road, Eleanor caught her first glimpse of the sprawling ranch, thousands of acres stretching toward the distant mountains, herds of cattle dotting the landscape like brown and white stars. The main house rose before them, a testament to Kane's success. 2 stories of whitewashed wood with a wraparound porch, it was grander than any home Eleanor had ever entered, let alone worked in. "Mr. Kane's expecting you," Pete said, helping her down. "Fair warning, he's particular about things." "Likes everything just so." Eleanor smoothed her travel-worn skirt and approached the front door. Before she could knock, it swung open to reveal the man himself. Jeremiah Kane was not what she'd expected. The rumors painted him as cold and imperious, but the man before her had kind eyes, the color of creek water, though shadows lurked beneath them. He was tall and broad-shouldered, probably 40 years old, with sun-weathered skin and silver threading through his dark hair. "Miss Whitmore," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Welcome to the Double J. I trust your journey was tolerable." "Yes, sir. Thank you for the opportunity." He gestured her inside, and Eleanor's breath caught. The interior was beautiful but neglected. Dust coating the fine furniture, cobwebs in the corners. The scent of loneliness permeating every room. "My wife passed 2 years ago," Jeremiah said quietly, following her gaze. "I'm afraid the house has suffered for it. Mrs. Henderson, my previous housekeeper, retired last month to live with her daughter in Denver. I need someone to restore order, Miss Whitmore. Can you do that?" Eleanor met his eyes directly. "I can, Mr. Kane, I give you my word." The first week passed in a blur of work. Eleanor rose before dawn and often didn't stop until the stars emerged. She scrubbed floors, beat rugs, washed windows, and organized the chaos that had accumulated over 2 years of grief and neglect. Jeremiah was rarely in the house during daylight hours, out managing his vast holdings. But in the evenings, he'd return tired and dusty, and Eleanor would have dinner waiting. At first, they barely spoke beyond pleasantries. But gradually, over meals taken at the long dining table, conversations began to bloom. He told her about the ranch, about the challenges of drought and cattle prices, about his dreams of breeding better stock. She told him about growing up in San Antonio, about her parents who died of fever, about the years spent caring for an elderly aunt who'd left her with nothing but debts. Eleanor found herself watching for his return each evening, listening for the sound of his boots on the porch. She told herself it was merely concern for having his meal ready on time. But her heart knew the truth. One evening in her 3rd week, as she served him roast beef and potatoes, Jeremiah looked at her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "Miss Whitmore, Eleanor, if I may, I wonder if I might speak frankly with you." She set down the serving platter carefully. "Of course, Mr. Kane. Jeremiah, please. We're well past formality, I think." He stood, moving to the window overlooking his land. "This house has been dead since Margaret passed, but you've brought it back to life. More than the house, if I'm honest. I find myself looking forward to the end of each day in a way I haven't in years." Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. "Sir Jeremiah, I'm pleased I can be of service." He turned to face her, and the longing in his eyes was unmistakable. "It's more than service. Surely you must know that." She did know. She'd felt it too, the way the air changed when he entered a room, the warmth that spread through her at his rare smiles, the dreams that had begun to visit her at night. But reality was a harsh mistress. And Eleanor had learned long ago to see herself clearly. She was a large woman, her body heavy and soft, where fashionable women were slim and corseted. Years of hard work and simple food had made her strong, but had not made her beautiful by society's standards. "Mr. Kane," she said softly, "I appreciate your kindness, but I must be direct with you. I am not the sort of woman a man like you courts. I'm too large, too plain. I'm built for work, not for—" She couldn't finish, shame burning her cheeks. Jeremiah crossed the room in 3 strides, stopping just before her. "Not for what?" "For happiness. For being cared for. Eleanor, look at me." She raised her eyes reluctantly. "I lost Margaret to childbed fever," he said, his voice rough with old pain. "She was small and delicate, everything society says a woman should be. And I loved her dearly, but she's gone, and I've been alone with my grief for 2 long years. Then you arrived, and suddenly this house feels like a home again. You make me laugh. You challenge my opinions. You've organized my accounts better than any banker. And when you smile, which is too rare, it's like sunrise breaking over the prairie. But Jeremiah, let me finish." He reached out tentatively, and when she didn't pull away, he took her hands in his. They were work-roughened, stained from cleaning, but he held them as though they were precious. "I don't give a damn what society thinks. I'm 42 years old, and I've built an empire from nothing. I answer to no one but God and my own conscience. And both are telling me that you're the finest woman I've ever known." Tears spilled down Eleanor's cheeks. "I want to believe you. But I know what I am. I've seen how people look at me, how they whisper. A woman of my size, it's not proper for a man in your position. Eleanor." His voice was gentle but firm. "Do you have feelings for me? Tell me the truth." She could have lied. It would have been safer, easier. But Eleanor Whitmore had never been a coward. "Yes," she whispered. "God help me, yes. Then that's all that matters." He released one of her hands to brush away her tears with his thumb. "I won't push you, but I need you to understand something. Your size isn't a flaw to me. It's just part of who you are, and who you are is wonderful. You're strong and capable and kind. You've brought joy back into my life. That's what I see when I look at you." Eleanor wanted to believe him, but a lifetime of being made to feel less than couldn't be erased in a moment. "I need time," she said finally, "to think, to understand what you're truly asking." "Take all the time you need," Jeremiah said. "I'm a patient man. I've waited 2 years already. I can wait longer for something real." The weeks that followed were a strange dance of proximity and distance. Jeremiah made no demands, but his feelings were evident in 1,000 small ways. He brought her wildflowers from the prairie. He hired additional ranch hands to help with the heavier work so she wouldn't strain herself. He asked her opinion on ranch matters and actually listened, implementing her suggestions. Eleanor found herself softening despite her fears. She began to see herself through his eyes, or tried to. When she caught her reflection in the mirror, she made herself look past society's judgments. She saw a woman with clear eyes and capable hands, a woman who had survived loss and hardship and remained kind despite it all. One Saturday, Jeremiah asked if she'd ride out with him to see the northern pastures. Eleanor hadn't been on a horse in years, but she agreed. He chose a sturdy mare named Bess, patient and gentle, and helped Eleanor mount. His hands on her waist were steady and respectful, but she felt the warmth of them long after he'd swung onto his own horse. They rode for an hour, Jeremiah pointing out various features of the ranch, talking about his plans for the future. They stopped at a creek bed lined with cottonwoods, their leaves whispering in the breeze. "This is my favorite spot on the whole ranch," Jeremiah said as they dismounted. "Margaret and I used to come here when we were courting. After she died, I couldn't bear to visit. But today, with you, it feels right again." They sat on a fallen log by the creek. The water burbled over smooth stones, and somewhere a meadowlark sang. "Can I ask you something?" Eleanor said. "Why me, truly?" Jeremiah was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Margaret was a good wife, and I mourned her deeply. But if I'm honest, our marriage was more arrangement than passion. We were suited to each other, and we made it work. But with you, Eleanor, it's different. You make me feel alive. You challenge me. You make me laugh. When I'm with you, I'm not just the wealthy rancher or the grieving widower, I'm just Jeremiah, and that's enough." He turned to face her fully. "As for your size, do you want to know what I really think? I think you're beautiful. I think your curves are womanly and appealing. I think your strength is evident in every line of your body. I think about holding you, and I want that more than I've wanted anything in years. Not despite who you are, but because of it." Eleanor felt something break open inside her chest, some hard shell of protection she'd built around her heart. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "Afraid of believing this is real. Afraid of what people will say. Afraid of not being enough for you. Then let me be afraid with you," Jeremiah said. "We'll face it together." He leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But Eleanor didn't move. His lips met hers, gentle and questioning, and she felt herself responding, melting into the kiss. His arms came around her, solid and sure, and for the first time in her life, Eleanor felt cherished. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "I love you, Eleanor Whitmore," Jeremiah said. "I know it's fast, but I'm old enough to know what I want. And I want you, as my wife, my partner, my companion. Will you marry me?" Eleanor's mind raced with all the reasons to say no, all the practical concerns, all the ways this could go wrong. But her heart, long starved for love, knew only one answer. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you." The wedding took place 4 weeks later in the small church in Redemption. Eleanor had worried about the townspeople's reactions, but Jeremiah's status and obvious devotion to her seemed to quiet most tongues. Those who did whisper found themselves excluded from the rancher's business dealings and social graces. Jeremiah protected his bride fiercely. Eleanor wore a dress of blue silk that Jeremiah had ordered from Dallas, made to fit her perfectly by a seamstress who asked no questions and charged accordingly. As she walked down the aisle on Pete's arm, the foreman having volunteered proudly for the honor, she saw Jeremiah waiting at the altar, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "You're breathtaking," he whispered when she reached him. The wedding night, Eleanor had feared, but Jeremiah was patient and tender. He took his time, worshipping her body with touches and words, until she believed finally that he truly desired her. Their lovemaking was gentle at first, then passionate, and afterward, as they lay tangled together in the darkness, Eleanor felt complete in a way she never had before. "I was wrong," she murmured against his chest. "About what?" "About not being made for this. For being loved." "You've shown me I was wrong about everything." Jeremiah kissed the top of her head. "We were both wrong. Me about thinking I could never love again, you about thinking you were unlovable. Turns out we were just waiting for the right person." The first year of marriage brought challenges. Some of the neighboring ranchers' wives snubbed Eleanor at social gatherings. There were whispered comments about unseemly haste and questionable matches, but Eleanor found she cared less than she'd expected. With Jeremiah beside her, his love unshakable, the opinions of small-minded people seemed less important. She transformed the ranch house into a true home, adding touches of warmth and welcome. She also proved to have a head for business, helping Jeremiah negotiate better prices for his cattle and managing the household accounts with skill that saved them thousands of dollars. More importantly, she made Jeremiah happy. His smiles came easier now, his laughter more frequent. The shadows under his eyes faded. The ranch hands noticed the change in their boss and approved, treating Eleanor with respect and affection. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Eleanor rested her head on Jeremiah's shoulder. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Choosing me?" "Never." His response was immediate and certain. "You're the best decision I ever made. You've given me back my life, Eleanor. You've given me joy. What more could any man want? A family, perhaps," she said quietly. "Children." Jeremiah was silent for a moment. "If God blesses us with children, I'll be grateful. But if not, I have you, and that's more than enough. You're my family, Eleanor. You're my home." As the stars emerged one by one in the darkening sky, Eleanor finally fully believed him. She'd spent so long thinking herself unworthy of love, too large to be desired, too plain to be cherished. But Jeremiah had shown her the truth, that love wasn't about fitting society's narrow mold. It was about finding someone who saw you, truly saw you, and loved what they found. She'd come to the Double J Ranch as a housekeeper, convinced she was too flawed for anything more. But she'd found something she'd never dared to hope for. A man who loved her not despite who she was, but because of it. A man who held her in the night and called her beautiful. A man who'd built an empire, but counted her as his greatest treasure. Eleanor Whitmore, Kane, had finally come home. The drought broke in spectacular fashion that spring, bringing rains that turned the prairie green and lush. The cattle thrived, and with them the ranch's fortunes. But the greatest blessing came in early autumn when Dr. Morrison confirmed what Eleanor had suspected for weeks. "You're going to have a baby, Mrs. Kane," he said with a smile. Due in the early spring, if my calculations are correct. Jeremiah's joy was boundless. He insisted Eleanor rest more, hired additional help for the house, and spoke to her belly each night as though the baby could already hear him. "Told you you were perfect," he'd say. His hand spread across her growing stomach. "Perfect for me, perfect for this." "Perfect, period." Eleanor would laugh and run her fingers through his hair, marveling at how completely her life had changed. She'd arrived in redemption expecting nothing more than honest work and fair wages. Instead, she'd found love, acceptance, and a future brighter than any she'd dared to dream. The baby, a daughter, was born in April as the wildflowers bloomed across the prairie. They named her Margaret Rose, honoring both Jeremiah's first wife and the promise of new beginnings. She had her father's eyes and her mother's determination, and from her first moments, she was loved beyond measure. As Eleanor held her daughter, while Jeremiah looked on with tears streaming down his weathered cheeks, she understood something profound. She had traveled to this ranch thinking herself too flawed for love, too imperfect for happiness. But she'd been wrong. She wasn't too anything. She was exactly right. Right for Jeremiah, right for this life, right for the love they'd built together. In the end, it wasn't about being the right size or the right shape, or fitting society's expectations. It was about finding someone who looked past the surface and loved what lay beneath, the heart, the soul, the essence of who you truly were. And Eleanor Kane, once Eleanor Whitmore, the housekeeper who'd thought herself unworthy, had found exactly that in the dusty plains of Texas under the wide western sky, in the arms of a rancher who taught her that love, true love, saw no obstacles, only possibilities.